We've gone from throwing rocks at each other to building bombs that can wipe out entire cities. How on earth did that happen? Well, the history of human conflict is really a story of escalating power. And in this explainer, we're going to trace that deadly evolution, looking at the most lethal weapons from every major era of warfare.
I mean, just look at this. On one side, you have humanity's first weapon, a rock, and on the other, our latest, a nuclear bomb. The journey from that rock to that bomb is what we're talking about today. It's a story about innovation, sure, but also about a terrifying escalation in our ability to destroy. So the big question is, how did we get from here to here?
Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. We're starting in the Stone Age. You gotta remember, back then there were no armies, no giant empires. Conflict was up close and personal, and the weapons, well, they definitely reflected that brutal simplicity. You know, for the longest time, the best weapon we had was just a rock. And don't knock it, it was surprisingly effective. I mean, one good throw can crack a human skull like an egg. But then we had our first major technological breakthrough. Some genius had the idea to take that sharp rock and stick it on the end of a stick. Boom, the spear was born. And just like that, you had reach, a massive advantage. Now, as civilization started to pop up, the weapons got way more sophisticated. Take the Aztec macuahuitl, for example. This thing was absolutely terrifying. It wasn't just some wooden club. No, this was a flat wooden paddle lined with razor-sharp pieces of obsidian glass. It was designed with one goal in mind, to cause wounds so horrific that you simply could not survive them. But you know, it wasn't always about maximum carnage on the battlefield. Sometimes weapons were designed for pure entertainment. I'm talking about the Roman Colosseum. Think about the Retiarius gladiator. This guy fought with a fisherman's toolkit, a trident, and a net. He had almost no armor and had to rely on speed and agility against his heavily armored opponents. The trident wasn't even meant for a quick kill. The wounds were often small, designed to drag out the fight and keep the crowd on the edge of their seats. All right, let's jump forward in time to the Middle Ages. The whole game of war is about to change. Yeah, hand-to-hand combat was still super important, but now the biggest problem wasn't the guy standing in front of you. It was the massive, towering stone walls of a castle. So how do you deal with a giant stone wall? Well, engineers came up with a whole new toolkit of destruction. You had massive trebuchets that could launch 200-pound stones for hundreds of meters. You had giant crossbows called ballistas that could punch right through defenses. Even something as simple as a siege hook, literally a giant hook to pull walls down, was brutally effective. And then there was the battering ram, which was, let's be honest, just a log. I'm sure it was annoying to use and you get splinters everywhere.
So while armies were busy figuring out how to knock down walls, navies were perfecting a completely different kind of terror. It was called Greek fire. Imagine the sticky, flammable goo that was sprayed from tubes or chucked in grenades. But here's the truly terrifying part. It burned on water, an absolute nightmare for anyone on a wooden ship. The Byzantine Empire guarded the recipe so closely that to this day, we still don't know exactly what it was made of.
Okay, everything we've talked about so far is about to seem quaint, because we've now arrived at the single invention that changed everything. Not just warfare, but maybe our entire existence as a species. This is the Gunpowder Revolution. And it all started with a weapon from 10th century China called the fire lance. Think about this. You start with a regular spear. Then you attach a tube of gunpowder to it that sprays fire. Pretty cool, right? But then they thought, hey, what if we add some junk, pellets, debris into that tube? Now, when it blasts, it shoots all that stuff out. So in one single weapon, you have a spear, a flamethrower, and the world's very first gun. A total game changer. This wasn't just a new weapon. It was a total shift in how we thought about war. All of a sudden, any peasant could kill a heavily armored knight from a safe distance. Years of training, expensive armor, poof, it was all basically useless. The goal wasn't just to beat your enemy anymore. The new goal was to destroy them in the fastest, most brutal way possible. And as we're about to see, things were only going to get worse. And that philosophy of total destruction, it really hit its terrifying peak in the 20th century. Thanks to the Industrial Revolution, humanity figured out how to apply factory-level efficiency to the act of killing. This is when war became an industry. I want you to imagine something. You're a soldier, stuck in a trench in World War I. It's been quiet for days, maybe too quiet. Then your watchman starts screaming. You look over the top and you see it, a huge, rolling cloud of yellowish-brown smoke drifting across no man's land, and it's coming right for you. There's no one to shoot at. There's just this silent, creeping horror. You try to run, but it's no use. The gas is all around you. You're completely enveloped. And almost immediately, your skin starts to blister. Your eyes are swelling shut. Every breath feels like you're inhaling fire. It is excruciatingly painful, and you're screaming. Everyone around you is screaming. This was mustard gas. And the horror didn't stop if you made it out of the cloud. You could suffer for weeks, blind with chemical burns and your lungs filling with fluid before you finally died. It was so awful, so horrific, that it was eventually banned by international treaty as being too inhumane even for war. Now, let that sink in for a second. We're talking about World War I, a war where 20 million people died from machine guns, massive artillery shells, and tanks. And in the middle of all that carnage, it was mustard gas that was deemed too cruel. That tells you everything you need to know about how terrible this weapon was. And all of this brings us to our final chapter, the story of a weapon so powerful, so absolute, that some people call it humanity's final weapon. Welcome to the nuclear age. During World War II, there was a frantic race to turn this new thing, nuclear technology, into a weapon. The Allies won that race. The first atomic bomb ever used in war was codenamed Little Boy. It weighed over 9,000 pounds. When it was dropped on Hiroshima in 1945, it killed tens of thousands of people in a single flash, and so many more died from radiation sickness in the weeks, months, and years that came after. But that was just the beginning of the nuclear arms race. See, those early bombs used fission, splitting atoms apart. But scientists soon figured out that fusion, smashing atoms together, the same process that powers the sun, was way, way more powerful. And in 1961, the Soviet Union put that theory to the test. They detonated a fusion bomb, the Tsar Bomba. To this day, it is the most powerful explosive ever created by humans. It produced a mushroom cloud 67 kilometers high. So, 67 kilometers. That number is so big, it's kind of hard to even wrap your head around it. So let's put it in perspective. Mount Everest, right? The highest point on our entire planet is about 8.8 kilometers tall. The cloud from this one bomb was as tall as stacking almost 8 Mount Everests on top of one another. Just incredible. So here we are. The nuclear bomb is hopefully the last weapon we'll ever invent. There's really no defense against it. The only thing stopping its use is the terrifying knowledge that if one country launches theirs, the other side will launch theirs right back. And that leaves us with a pretty heavy question, doesn't it? We did it. We built the ultimate weapon. So, what happens next?